Hello and welcome back to another new edition of Windows on Current Affairs, and today we talk about the second stage of sustainable development. Now have Egypt been finished with its second democratic experience, very successful, the presidential elections, and Egyptians went to the polls and casted their votes to choose their next president, and the results are going to be announced this Monday, and people are feeling so satisfied and proud of their country and their history and where they have come a long way after June 30th, and their achievements, the economic leap, and all those elements that Egyptians have taken on their agenda to be able to build on for the second stage in Egypt's life and to take off to another second stage, developed stage of sustainable development. Of course, many committees, many international communities came to observe, were invited by Egypt to come and observe the presidential elections and observe how transparent, how fair, how developed, how progressed is the democratic process in Egypt. And among the committees or the communities that came over to observe, were invited to observe the elections, is some African brothers who came over, and we have with us here live in the studio Mr. Paul Okomo. He's head of Secretariat, the African Platform, and he's from Nairobi, and Mr. Henry Oriokot, member of AU ECOSOC, and he is from Uganda. Good evening, gentlemen, and you're very welcomed in Egypt.
Shukran, good evening.
You're welcome.
Yes.
First of all, before we delve into the details, it must have been a very interesting experience and an important one also that you are going to register on your agenda to be able to observe the second successful progress democratic experience Egypt have taken ever since June 30th. I would love to start off by you, Mr. Okomo.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I think Egypt is one of the most beautiful countries that I've ever come across. I used to think my country is beautiful until I came to Egypt and I realized we have a lot to see here. You've got a history that dates back to beyond many countries in the world. There is no country in the world that has got a history that is as rich and as Egypt. But I must say it has been very exciting for me, and I was reflecting on it and I was saying many of the African countries have had anything between 10 and 14 elections, because most elections are every 5 years. Egypt is just having its third election. And so for me it has been exciting to see how things have moved on from 2011 and seeing how 2015 went, and then now looking at it and seeing whatever 2018, and I can see what the future holds. And for me, what is most important is to remember that you are on your third step, while many democracies have had hundreds and hundreds. I mean, the United States has had over 250 years of democracy. Most of the countries in Europe have had 400 years. If you look at, as I've said, in my country, Kenya, we have had 13 elections. So there's been an opportunity for us to learn quite a lot as well. Yes.
That's nice to know. I'm going to move on to you, Mr. Oriokot, and you are a member of AU ECOSOC, and you are from Uganda. Of course, observing what Mr. Okomo have just shared, talking with me right now, the democratic experience. I remember that after June 30th, there were a lot of misconceptions from people who did not have enough opportunity to delve into the real situation inside Egypt and figure out or realize what's happening. And we also, as Egyptians, remember some Western media outlets calling that this is a military coup and that something have happened in the country and that Egyptians were not really satisfied by what's happening, though that we Egyptians went in 43 million or billion, and we were mandating back then General Sisi to be able and support us to kick off the brotherhood. We remember that the AU have suspended also the membership of Egypt, and then when things became so clear, it have continued to support and empower Egypt as a backbone and stretch its hand back once again to their Egyptian brothers and work, together. If you could talk to us about that experience and how you felt today when you came and had the chance and opportunity to be able to be part of this democratic process.
Thank you very much. In fact, I'm so happy to be here and be part of the election observers. Again, I want to say thank you for the government of Egypt for having allowed us or giving us a chance of coming here to participate. Our being here is a landmark. First and foremost, it has shown solidarity in Africa, that we are one people. Egypt is in Africa. It is always a media that portrays a wrong information outside there. But our being here, we have got a different perspective altogether. People are very friendly and loving. Wherever we went, they were welcoming. It was only full of jubilation. When you come to the elections, Egypt is still very young, if we can remember where it has come from. But the way they conducted their elections, it was impressive. I loved so much the way they were dealing with the old people, because all the old people were being helped and catered for. The disabled people were also catered for. If you look at two countries that have had several elections, you find that there was no provision for the disabled people. They are not catered for. They are all treated in the same way. But this was something exceptional. Now, when you come, look at the way people voted. It was also good compared to countries that have had several elections. So that alone has changed the perception. And even as when we go outside there, we are going to tell people what exactly we have seen. Now, another thing is that our being here, it has really showed people outside there that no, Egypt is a good country. It's not what people believe outside there. Because it was so unique, because when they come here, we're wondering how we're going to be there. But reaching here, this is another home. If that's why you see now I'm talking in your studio here, happily smiling with you without any scare. So I've loved that so much. When I had to answer the other question, I believe that me as a member of African Union, ECOSOC, we represent civil societies, and I'm representing all those civil societies in Uganda. The African Union is always behind Egypt. That's why you find that in Egypt, we have a representative here, representing all the civil societies in Egypt. And that is Maat. Mr. Ayman is representing Egypt in the African Union ECOSOC. So that is a sign to show that all civil society is behind Egypt. And we are happy that we are behind the whole process. Whatever is going on, we are behind it. Because a child does not begin by running, but begins learning how to crawl, stand up, begin practicing how to walk before it can begin running. So to me, I believe that this was a good beginning.
Right. That's very an optimistic way to start off talking about the democratic process and its development in Egypt. Now, moving on to you, Mr. Okomo, you are head of the Secretariat African Platform. Of course, when we talk about that particular platform, we could talk about many elements. You are a coalition, and you are part of the Nزاهه coalition, 3 organizations that formed a coalition, and you have very important targets. If you would like to talk to us about your coalition and what exactly are you opting for?
I think there were two separate coalitions here. The first coalition was specifically for the election, and that was the Nزاهه coalition, and it was an organization in Egypt.
The name speaks for itself.
Yes,
in our language. I'm not sure, because we have, we share the same words sometimes in the...
Yes, I think it means integrity or something.
Of course.
Yes, exactly.
Transparency.
Yeah, transparency. So the transparency of the Nزaهه coalition was made of one organization in Egypt called Maat, which was the one that was authorized by the government to mobilize local observers from across the country. There was another one which was called Volunteers Without Borders, based in Lebanon. That was the one that was coordinating the international observers like ourselves. And then there was the one which was called the international...
the second was Volunteers Without
Borders.
Without Borders.
Yes. And then the third...
Just like Doctors Without Borders.
Yes, that's correct.
These are common groups. They work for the sake of human race worldwide.
That's correct. And then there is the Ecumenical Alliance for Development and Human Rights, which is based in Geneva. So the 3 of them are the ones that formed the Nزaهه coalition, and so we came here under the Nزaهه coalition. But we came from different organizations and from different countries. So I came from the Africa Platform. And the Africa Platform is a civil society platform that supports the democratic agenda and the governance agenda across 24 countries in Africa. So we work on something called the social contract. And the social contract is the ability of the society to be the one to shape what the government does. If you look at many democracies or many governments, it is the government that decides what needs to be done for citizens. The social contract says no. It is the citizens who decide what they want to do for themselves. We also work on something called state-society relations, which is the relationship between the citizens and their government. In many countries, after the parliamentary elections, the members of parliament tell you, you have now chosen us, we now have the power to speak for you, and we can do anything. And the citizens are supposed to say no. It is just that not all of us can sit inside a room called parliament. So we have allowed a few of you to go and sit, but we did not allow you to go and start making your own personal decisions inside there. The responsibility still lies on the citizens, and the citizens have a right to keep on making demands of the few people that whatever that they chose there. So part of our job as Africa Platform is to make sure that there's a continuous relationship between the society and the state and the other arms of government on a continuous basis. But the other part that we engaged in as Africa Platform is to deal with a lot of other international bodies that work in certain countries and sometimes do good, but sometimes they also don't do very well. So we work to challenge whether it is the people who we know that there are people who call themselves donors, and sometimes some of the work that donors do is good, but sometimes part of the work that donors do ends up causing harm. If you look at the people like the World Bank, sometimes what they do is good, but sometimes what they do end up causing harm. And so part of what we try and do within the social contract is to make sure that we also deal with those institutions as well. So there's a very broad area of what it is. And I think in the context of the Egyptian elections, one of the things that I hope that every single Egyptian understands, and I've been using this example for the last 3 or so days, is that what you have had over the last 72 hours is a wedding. And you still have a marriage that we must all live by. So if we concentrate too much on the wedding, and we forget that after a wedding you need to buy food, you need to pay rent, you need to do all those kinds of things, you need to raise up children, you need to whatever, there are a lot of things that still remains undone. And even as we are waiting for the results, it is good for people to celebrate and people celebrating weddings. I saw one of the Egyptians' weddings, and the bride keeps on changing dresses after every song, and it is very, very exciting, and they've got these vehicles, and they enter into the boat. But after that, the two of you must begin a marriage. And for me, democracy is the most critical part because it is the marriage. And so the Egyptian citizens, especially the young people, must begin asking themselves, what kind of a country are we going to build over the next 4 or 5 years? In fact, what kind of a country are they going to build over the next 50 years? Because most politicians focus on 5 years until the next election. But for citizens, this country belongs to us. Our children are going to be here. If we get mistaken and we only focus where the politicians are focusing on the 5 years, we will lose the country. So democracy is much, much longer than that. Yes.
Right. Moving on to you, Mr. Oryukat, you focused over the turnout. It seems that you were pretty impressed by the turnout, and how do you've seen Egyptians, even the handicapped, the disabled, the under the age, accompanying their parents or their whoever, escorting the elderly and all that. People were very keen coming over to the ballot boxes. Describe to me, how did you assess that particular, experience for Egyptians as an observer?
Yes, thank you so much.
The turnout and the Egyptians who came over.
First of all, what impressed me, the culture. See, cultural identity is something very important in any community.
Exactly.
So because of the culture, you find the elders lead by example. That's why you find that despite of the age, they made sure that they turned up, because they want the young ones to follow suit as they grow. And the young ones, the people who were manning the elections, made sure that they took care of these elderly people. And that alone was an encouragement to the elderly people that they are valued. Because every human being on this earth needs to be valued. Now, when we talk about a turn up, because there were 3 days, so I cannot specify or say that the turn up was poor or too big, because everyone gave a priority, either to come on a first day, a second day, or a third day. And still even the time varies, because I did not sit in a particular polling station from morning to sunset. I was moving all over different polling stations. Yeah, but I was only so happy because wherever I went, at least you could find some people there, which was quite lovely. Yeah, and the number of the polling stations were so many, whereby it gave people a chance to reduce the hours they would make in lining up. So because the polling stations were many, you just go, drop your ballot paper, and you walk out. So there is no need of me come and say that, oh, there is a very long line to determine that people were so many. It is now only after they have counted the ballot papers, that's when we say that, okay, this number of people voted. And that's when we can get the exact number, whether there were many or there were few.
Right. I'm going to move on to you, Mr. Okomo, and you have talked the political experiences of countries, the inspiring one and the not really very inspiring. But also, we could talk about the crisis of other countries. I mean, Egypt, observing Egypt, going through all those stages, while other countries, very close neighboring countries, are still struggling, and sometimes the situation is getting even backwards, or there is a relapse, or getting even worse. It seems very sad. I mean, Egypt have been very good quality of time, have taken, I mean, a leap and have taken it back its lead role and have proved to the whole world that we could do it. In spite of all the, I mean, the stumbling that Egypt have been through ever since the first revolution. I mean, assessing the situation of Egypt and this second democratic process for Egypt, what does it take for a country to be able to build itself on a good, solid ground, to stand on its feet? Is it history? I mean, we have been through a lot. I mean, we've been almost taken over by the Brotherhood, and even before there was a dictatorship and everything. I mean, before the Brotherhood, I mean, for the January 25th revolution, there was dictatorship. But now, as we are experiencing democracy, I mean, do you relate that to the history of Egypt, that Egyptians are standing on solid ground, they have political maturity, cultural maturity, and that's why they were not broken easily?
I mean, first of all, there is a part that we as the African continent need to be proud of regarding Egypt. And that is, before even anybody thought that there would be a country called America, we had our pharaohs. We are organized much more than any civilization anywhere in the world. You only need to step into Egypt to realize that it is a mockery for people to come from Europe and say we have come with democracy. They're not even 200 years old, not even whatever 300 years old. We are talking about 4,000 years. We are talking about 5,000 years. We are talking about systems that has given the world so much. You are the one who has given us a lot of what we today think is given. And so for me, I think there are three things that we need to understand, and I'm hoping that the citizens of Egypt, especially the younger generation, will look at it. First of all, understand your history, understand where you've come from. I think it is unfair for the young generation or for the Egyptians to think that their history began in 2011. Their history didn't begin in 2011. It did not even begin with the dictator. They have got a history that is thousands of years old, and they need to open those old books. They need to visit the Cairo Historical Museum. I was there. Look at that history and begin to just see how rich they are and how much they have taught the rest of the world what democracy is. So that is the most important part. The second important part is decide who you are. I think it is sometimes we let ourselves be defined so much by others that we don't take time to understand who we are. Who exactly?
That's a very important point.
Who exactly is an Egyptian? And because if you do not understand who you are, then somebody else will try to make you understand yourself. So we have got people coming with a piece of paper, and they say, this is how democracy looks like. It must have this corner, and then you must have election like this, and if you have got this turnout, then you have a democracy. Who says that? Because they are completely different.
Isn't that what's power countries? And
that is what they have done,
and dictating us to do so.
And then look at what it has done to the African countries. If you look at all the 54 countries in Africa, you can see all of them were suddenly given something and told, this is democracy.
Dictated to be able.
Yes, and they were told it must be like this. And look at what it has done. Look at the kind of chaos that it has created. Because why? They did not allow us to understand our society. They did not allow us to understand our history. They did not allow us to understand how we are organized. We had our own kings. We had our own chiefs. We had our own way in which we led ourselves. They came and they said, that is useless. Here is some studies of how democracy needs, whatever needs to look like. I think it is unfair, and we need to start understanding ourselves. But the most important, the other is you must decide as a country where you are going. It is important for you to compare yourself with others. But there is a philosopher who once said, if you compare yourself with others, you'll always be vain and bitter, because there will always be greater and lesser persons than yourself. So if it is a game you can never win. The game of comparison is a game you can never win.
So you're with or against?
Yeah. No. You decide for yourself where you want. Decide your path. As a group of Egyptians, as citizens, decide what kind of contract do you have with your government. What kind of Egypt do you want to see in the next whatever 20 years? You can learn from your neighbors. You can learn from their mistakes. And they say that only a fool thinks that they will live long enough to learn from their own mistakes. So learn from other people's mistakes, but do not try to copy what others are doing and try to think that it will fit. Pick what is good for you, but what you see is not good for you based on your society. Go tell them, thank you, but we do not want this. This is where we want to go.
But that would lead me to another important question that I'm going to annex to my first question.
Yes.
Do you think that there are some experiences that could be fit for some countries? I mean, some democratic experiences that could be fit for these countries, but not fit for another one? I mean, are all the democratic experiences fit for anybody?
No, I can tell you, let me give you the example. The United States has got a system where the ultimate authority that decides the rules of the country is sometimes not even the president. Sometimes it's not even the Senate. It is the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court can make a decision that can overturn the entire structure of a country, even when the citizens don't like it. And once the Supreme Court has made a decision, everybody has got to live with it. Now, Americans are happy with it. They're comfortable with that. Now try that on an African country. Because an African country, we are socialized to act together, to think together, and to build something together. We do not have a system where you have got a group of people saying this is what must happen, and then we must live with it. So it is important when we are talking about democracy to understand that democracy is fitted within the context of a society. You cannot have a democracy working. You can borrow some things from some other areas, but you cannot replicate
so you can mix
democracy.
And match.
You can mix and match only insofar as you knowing where you want to go, you knowing your history, and you knowing how you are organized. But otherwise, if you just do a mix and match whatever without a balance, you may even spoil the food. Yes.
Exactly. That's a good expression. But moving on to you, Mr. Oryokol, ECOSO represents civil society. So that's a very important job that you're doing, because civil society is the backbone of many elements in any cultural, democratic, social justice of any country. What exactly do you do to empower and enforce the civil societies worldwide? And talk to me about the importance of civil work in any society.
Civil societies do a very big role. And they don't work in isolation. They supplement what governments do. Because we believe that when a government is doing something, there are always some gaps. They check up those gaps and they try to fill up. Where there is a mistake, they say, hey, here is a mistake. When it comes to the community, they make sure that they empower the communities. They sensitize the communities, because they have to make a community understand that the power belongs unto them. All the decisions that run the country are made by the people. It is on that ground that you are seeing that yesterday there was voting, because it is people to decide. There is no president who decides by himself. It's people to decide that we want so and so to be our leader. So as NGOs, that is what we always try to promote. And it is on that ground that you find that ECOSOC tries as much as it can that every country we get 2 representatives, of which Maat is one of them. So it's on that ground still you find that Maat went ahead to organize these elections observers, because they know that it is their mandate to hold that and empower people of Egypt and hold the governments responsible for any messes that have been caused.
Right. Going back to you, Mr. Okomo, of course, as a secretary, head of the Secretary of African Platform, you have many things to be, on your agenda to be able, that you're looking forward to change in the world. Among them is the definition, the ideal definition of democracy, the ideal definition of violating human rights, the ideal definition of opposition, the ideal